So let's go ahead and start with any opening comments or suggestions. Let's go in the order that uh, Dr. Palacios Rojas, excuse me. Would you like to introduce yourself and have any opening conversation or comments about things that you identify as key to look at? These three people are identified as people coming from outside of the wheat complex. So they have different set of experiences, different set of things where they have also had experience in this, and see what kind of insights that they can share from that. So I'll hand off.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's been unfortunate we have a lot of meetings going on right now, and I haven't been able to participate fully during the interesting agenda that you have today. But anyway, my name is Natalia Palacios. I work at CIMMYT, the International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement in Mexico. And I have been involved in the development of biofortified maize. We work at the beginning of the 2000 in the development of high zinc maize and high provitamin A maize. So this was part of a global initiative led by Harvest Plus at that time, and it was a consortium of different stakeholders, and the breeding work was being done by the different CGR centers. So in the case of maize, most of the work was done here in Mexico, but our sister center called IITA in Nigeria was also doing a development of germoplasm. What I can say 20 years after we started to work on this, it's been a long journey. We started actually taking advantage of the genetic diversity that was available at the moment. Especially, we look at the diversity in the germoplasm bank and trying to identify those varieties that had a higher concentration. Let's talk about zinc in this case. So we were trying to identify those ones under different growing conditions, because as we know, in the case of zinc, well, the accumulation depends on how much zinc is in the soil. The main thing, or the most important part for the breeding, was to ensure that whatever variety we develop had the similar or higher yield compared to a conventional variety, because otherwise the farmers won't take the variety. So that was really one of the focus, and of course ensuring that the variety had higher concentration of zinc. One of the good things that we did at that time, I can say, is that we started to think about the final product in a discussion with different disciplines. So there were breeders, geneticists, plant physiologists being involved, nutritionists, and food processors. And that was the discussion at the, let's say, academic level, at the scientific level, trying to see the pros and cons of the different aspects in order to have the variety. We also engage other stakeholders, farmers, processors, but I have to say that we fail to keep them engaged during the process. And I think although we hear their concerns at the beginning, we didn't really follow up with them in every step during the breeding process. So after 6 years, more or less, of breeding work, we released the first varieties. The focus for biofortified zinc was mainly in Latin America, and the focus for provitamin A maize was in Southern Africa, especially in Zambia, because the objective at the beginning was, let's prove that the product makes sense in one place where there is high deficiency of vitamin A or high deficiency of zinc. And so that was the focus. And for zinc, I think for Latin America, the impact can be big, in the sense that, especially in Guatemala and Central America, where we were focusing, people consume whole kernel. So it is processed through nixtamalization, but it's the whole maize kernel. And like that, the zinc content is kept in the kernel. While we wanted to use this high zinc maize in other geographies, especially in Africa, when they decorticate the maize, you lose up to 60% of the zinc that is in the kernel. So that's something that we didn't really consider, but it was because we didn't focus on the processing for Africa. We were mainly focused on processing being used in Latin America. But again, at that time, we didn't know the full picture where zinc is being accumulated in the kernel. So I leave it up to here, and if you have some questions, and we can follow up on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And the next two are actually people that I've worked with for about 15 years now. And Jürgen Keil up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Rod. I do have a couple of slides. Am I going to share them, or are you guys going to do that? I'm not 100% sure, but I will introduce myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Jürgen. I live in the Netherlands, and try to bring maybe a little bit also a perspective out of Europe into this discussion. I worked in the agri-food value chains now for over 33 years. I just retired from Cargill. I worked there 33 years. And now I'm helping startups, foundations as well, these foundations and venture capitalists in questions of strategic agri-food questions. My career in Cargill, I worked in oilseeds processing, oils, biofuels, cocoa and chocolate, whatever you want, right? Different areas of the value chain. And I can resonate. I joined the last hour, with the questions of segregation and how do you create a profitable value chain, right? And how do you do this? So with that, I will focus on an example in the area of oils and fats, and I will just share a couple of the slides I made, because I think it's a little bit more easy to follow this.
Jürgen, one second. If you can just go ahead and share your screen, then that'll be the easiest way to share your slides.
Yeah. So I'm sharing my screen now. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
You tell me, because first of all, I have 4 slides only to share a little bit perspective, and I want to start a little bit broader, because I think the topic was also consumer trends and what are they shaping and how they're shaping the value chains in vegetable oils and fats. And of course, I will focus in later on nutrition and health, and on a value chain called high oleic sunflower oil in Europe. But I think it's important as well for this group, right, to take maybe a broader perspective. What are the trends and how does that work? Nutrition and health, sustainability and food safety, I think, are the 3 trends which have impacted the vegetable value chain the most, right? There are more actually healthy oils today in the system. I think there was a big shift to that. The topic of sustainability was huge, particularly with palm oil. And I think we went through a whole tirade of food safety, contaminant improvement in the industry as such. So it's a broad set of things which are actually shaping that. And also, I think there was a lot of discussion, how can an issue being solved, or how can an opportunity be captured, right? And one of them is obviously seed breeding and in introducing traits into the system. But if you look at the story of the last 20 years, I mean, I think besides seed breeding, there's a lot been done in food processing technology, reformulation in the area of health. And I think that can be important because how you bring basically something new to the market can be a combination of different factors. Similar in sustainability, a lot have been done at industry levels, right? There have been multi-stakeholder initiatives. There have been industry level initiatives. And there have been also a lot of labels, right? Fair trade is a label, for example, and a lot of companies have led successful programs as such. So kind of different problems, I mean, require different solutions, and the combination of them sometimes actually solves the topic. But what I want to talk a little bit more in depth about, I mean, is the introduction of high oleic sun oil in Europe, and I call it a story of two decades, because this whole transformation towards this high oleic sun oil in kind of a bigger application effort in the industry started really 20 plus years ago, where now we do have a different set of oils in snacks and many frying applications, which used to be palm based. Now it's really sunflower based. I think why this transformation was successful is that it was led by a very big customer, CPG, PepsiCo, which had a long-term view, and they also had a leadership position that actually other people have followed them in their footsteps, so to say. So there's strong market need. Wanted to switch out of palm in a more healthy oil, functional oil, and also an oil which they can actually claim on the package as well. So,
Jürgen, is this another slide?
Yeah. There should be success factors in high oleic sun oil now.
Sorry, you're not sharing it. Shall I maybe share my screen and then you can read it? It's easier, or?
Yeah, I can do it in different ways. It says for me, I can stop sharing because in my laptop it says sharing. Give me a second now. I have to switch the screens.
I can share it.
Yeah, it's maybe easier. So here goes to the fourth slide. Yeah, that's much easier if you do it that way. The next one. Next one, this one, yeah. So I started to talk about this slide, right? And these are the success factors in high oleic sun oil. And I talked about the strong market need of a company like PepsiCo, which created a strong need to switch out of palm oil. And in the beginning, again, it was a very long-term story. There was a coalition of people who were willing to make an investment initially. And I think you guys talked about this as well. How do we do this? And there was a strong coalition between farmers, which was the French Co-op. It was Cargill, PepsiCo, and a couple of other players who really made this happen at that moment in time. And I think what made it also a broader success is that there was what I call an iteration, right? There were different iterations in growing that value chain, which make it big enough that the additional cost didn't kind of swallow basically the whole program. So where there were other customers following, so the demand increased. And there was also a supply increase next to France, also going into other countries. If you share the next slide. So success factors, right? Why did it work? I think it was a superior product, right? It has functional benefits and you can claim it. So PepsiCo actually did increase market share. There was value in the chain, so everybody makes profit over time. There were really big players wanting to make that push, right? And there was a long-term strategic coordination and cooperation to make this work. So I want to give the group maybe a little bit of hope that some of those value chain really can grow over time if you manage in the correct way, and if your value proposition, of course, is strong enough to do this. Still today, high oleic is very strong, but it's more a main kind of crop almost right next to the normal sunflower crop, and I think it has a 20-30% market share in the European market as a sun oil, right? As a sun oil as such. I hope that gives a little bit of a a perspective, right, of how this has worked over the years.
Thanks a lot, Jürgen. So before we end up with we'll move to some questions. Fernando, are there comments that you'd like to go ahead and make after going ahead and introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Fernando Arias. I've been in the food business like 34 years, but always on the commercial side. So I've been trying to sell like high canola, canola oil, high oleic canola oil, low linolenic soybean oil, a grade 300 vinegar. And my take from a commercial side is if there's a need in the industry, it will change. But my experience, those two specifically, the canola and the high oleic soybean oil, which were consumer traits, but the industry always reformulated to the least cost. Part of the issue with the linoleic oil, I didn't develop it. It was a joint venture between Monsanto and Cargill, was that everyone in the supply chain tried to make money, right? And the cost couldn't pass along to the consumer. The high oleic canola oil, same thing. It was researched for a gazillion years. It lasted 3 years because it was the least cost formulation. The reason I bring up the grade 300 vinegar, and that was for a major quick service restaurant. The way the supply chain was able to keep the profitability was because this was used in a salad bar. And at the end of the day, without that 300 grade vinegar, you had a lot of microbial growth there. And the restaurants had to throw away the salad bar. Okay. So where did the money come from in order to pay the supply chain? The salad bar actually got a 1-day shelf life extension. And that was enough money to support the supply chain because it took out cost in the system. Why am I excited with this project in the foundation? Because we're trying to get to the least cost, and we're trying to get to an extension that's very broad. So the costs are shared with everyone in the communities. So if there's a need for consumers, it will go very quick. But if the supply chain isn't sustainable, the trade will die. It'll die in 2-3 years, especially if you can't make a claim. But I go back to, I'll tell you who the customer was. It was Chipotle. Chipotle never told anybody what happened. When Chipotle unhinged from McDonald's, somebody in Chipotle decided to take the antimicrobials out because they were natural, right? But they didn't realize they were there for a purpose. So they did it now with a 300 grade vinegar, but they got a shelf life extension. And it's still to this day now, 8 years into it, and the sales are still going on.
Okay, thank you, Fernando. So if you think about the experience that each of you have in terms of the successes, and each of you also have experience with failures in terms of introducing consumer-oriented traits, what are some of the keys for the industry and collaboration? And how would you differentiate those from the keys for success for individual players when they're thinking about their own profit and their own market share, et cetera? And maybe, Dr. Palacios, it looks like you may have some thoughts.
Yeah, well, the case of biofortification and biofortified crops is actually a little bit different in the sense that they were developed actually to try to alleviate some of the problems in the global south, especially in Southern Africa and Latin America. So yeah, it's a little bit different. What I would say in this case, and it's not only for high zinc or high provitamin A maize, it also happened previously with quality protein maize, is that since they are not, well, in the case of provitamin A, it's a visible trait, but in the other two cases, it's invisible trait. So farmers are not really motivated to plant those varieties because they don't see any value on that. Talking about only on the nutritional properties is not enough. You really have to bring something else, and that's why we were focusing also in ensuring the yield that they are profitable for the farmers. Unfortunately, in some cases, it's very difficult for the farmers to bear the cost of monitoring the nutritional quality, and people are not really looking for that. So my suggestion is just ensure that the farmer is really convinced of the product that we are developing, and also bring from the beginning the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, that people are really interested on that. When we talk about only nutrition, it's difficult to get a change. It's better to go around with other properties, other traits, and then if people consume it, if people accept it, then we can bring the nutrition component on the table. But going only from the nutrition point of view is hard. It's hard to change behaviors. It's hard to change the adoption from farmers and consumers.
Thank you. Jürgen, maybe it makes sense to, or Jürgen and then Fernando, to contrast your experience with what did lead to the success getting over the hump. And I mean, in the case of high oleic sunflower oil, I believe that that's the norm now, right? I mean, all the sunflower oil in Europe, the norm is high oleic right now. What led to that? And can you contrast that perhaps? And thinking about also, from Cargill's perspective, you were thinking about profit, full stop. It wasn't about the nutrition and health, but how did that thinking about the public health align with the ability to get profit?
I think from a market perspective, there's still other sun oil in Europe, but I mean, it's a major grade, right, of sun oil. And I think why that was successful is it was scalable, right? I mean, over time, right? So the price premium, which needed to be passed along in the chain, was enough, right? But it wasn't kind of pricing the product out of this. And I think in Cargill we also wanted to have more healthy oil, right? I mean, at that moment in time, as an alternative to our processes. And I think in the end as well, why it was successful is, I mean, there was a S&D developing, right? I mean, between the farming sector, which created the supply, and a growing demand at the other side. So the passing along, I mean, of the value actually, in most cases, I mean, has worked quite well. And in the meantime, it's more or less almost a normal, normal negotiation in that sense, right? Then the humps over it, right? You always need a strong promoter and some scale, critical scale, ideally in the first place, right? If you have a core customer, it's like you make an investment in an asset, whatever, right? I mean, you don't do this when you don't have demand. So this whole business case thinking, right, is important. So people want to invest if they know they have a return. So. Why can we kill ourselves in taking the value? I don't know, but I mean, I think it was a balance between bigger players and also very strong pharma corporation, right, which negotiated that. I think that's what actually positive. That kept each other in check, so to say.
Thank you, Jürgen. So Fernando, in the cases of the vegetable oil, my understanding is that the situation in the U.S. where you were focused is particularly different than in Europe. In Europe, PepsiCo led this and did a really big splash. You know, the health of the sun in you know, put it on the front of the package of their potato chips, and it was, you know, they grew market share materially with this. There was yelling matches about, you know, millions of dollars across the supply chain and who's going to get which piece of it and all that. My understanding is that in the US, introducing the trans fatty acid free alternative was a completely different dynamic. And just maybe contrasting it.
It goes back to the consumer. So, okay, so the high oleic canola oil was a huge driver, and all of you can guess who's the biggest franchise burger joint in the world whose fries are like gold, right? I think when I look at all these things, the three examples that I pointed out, nobody goes out to teach the consumer why it's better for them, why the trait actually helps them. So nobody went out, you know, this restaurant chain, they just wanted bad press to go away. The company who did the high oleic oil, same thing. They wanted their breakfast snack to stop getting bad press. And the vinegar people, they didn't want to give any more salmonella. But everybody reformulated and kept it a secret to the consumer. And right after they got over the hump, it was all reformulated to the least cost. So the high oleic canola oil, they figured out how to fix their processes, and it went to regular canola oil. The low linolenic trade oil for consumers, same thing. It lasted like 2 years and then went back, and they figured out how to process oil and palm oil. The vinegar served a purpose because they were able to share the costs through the supply chain. So I think I worked on a cutting edge antimicrobial, and the company I worked for had the resources to train or to teach consumers why they should ask for it, but declined because they were also servicing the processors, the meat processors. So they had $100 today, $200 in the future. They took the $100 today, right? Because they didn't want to upset their customers. I think where educating the consumer and the consumer asks for it, the value is more sustainable. Everything that I worked on, the consumer has not been educated, right? I love it's a see-through reformulation. Everybody, the industry calls it see-through, except the consumer doesn't see through it. So, you know, I think you need to educate consumers of the value of the trait and have them pull it along. If you don't educate consumers, the industry will just go over the hump and reformulate to lowest cost.
Thank you, Fernando. That makes a lot of sense. I'd like to dig a little into one of the things that I see as one of the biggest differences between increasing fiber, increasing vitamins and minerals, and, you know, eliminating bad stuff like reducing trans fatty acids or eliminating heavy metals from agricultural things. Because certainly, you know, when you're trying to eliminate trans fatty acids, it's like, well, the previous product really was nasty and bad for you, and then the new stuff is healthy, but how do you get rid of that? Whereas with the work that the Dr. Palacios, you were working on, it's like the fiber, that one of the strengths from a nutritional perspective of wheat is it has a lot of fiber, or it provides a lot of fiber to the American diet. So you're trying to bring attention to something that's a real strength of wheat and saying we're going to really strengthen that even more. But Dr. Palacios, I'm curious about what your experience has been, because you're also strengthening a strength. How have you done that? What has your experience been with educating and getting other elements of the supply chain to develop value for themselves from that?
Yeah, well, actually, in the case of biofortified crops, the advantage is that, I mean, it is case-by-case success. I wouldn't say it's a failure. As I mentioned before, in the case of biofortified high zinc maize, it really has an effect in the Latin American market, especially in Guatemala and Colombia, where people are consuming a whole grain. Working, and again, this is a different setting compared to the other two examples from the colleagues here. Working with the government is important, not only with the agricultural sector, but also with the health sector and the education sector, so that actually improve the awareness of the population. Our target was trying to contribute with the main staple that people consume to make it more healthy for the consumers. So working with them was very important. Working with the extensionists in the field in order to understand that even you cannot see the agronomic trait. I mean, you don't see the trait in the case of the nutrition, but you see the agronomic performance of the crop was also very positive. And yeah, there are small but successful cases, and we still continue working on that, and we still think that it might bring the solutions, or it will contribute to the health status of the most needed people. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jürgen and Fernando, I'd like to ask each of you about the preparation that happened along the supply chain prior to actual implementation and shifting the production process to incorporate the new healthier options. And what did that look like? How long did it take? What happened to the people that did it well and didn't do it well? Whatever you want to add to that. Maybe I'll keep in that order with Jürgen next.
Yeah. So I mean, initially, right? I mean, of course, you start from smaller volumes, right? It is this initial investment which you need to do. But I think there was quickly a realization if we can, if the demand could be at such a particular level, right, which is economically large enough, call it 10,000s of tons, that between the co-ops who can actually grow that, and kind of the location where that could be initially processed, and that was in Saint-Nazaire, right? For example, for Cargill, that we felt, let's say, from a origination perspective, then from a logistics perspective, and then from a processing perspective, we had, let's call it, big enough batches that this wouldn't be an economical, kind of killer, right? And of course, you go through these learning phases, right? These are very big factories which we had to partly switch over. That you don't do too many runs, but you do one or two, right, during the years, and you store the goods. That you can do this in a reasonable way. And I think that went through iterations. You can do many things wrong in this, right? Also in the whole S&D, because if you buy too much and you cannot sell it, right, you need to degrade that expensive seed, right? Which in that case I talked about was partly limited, but it did happen, and also the other way around. There might not be enough supply in a certain amount of year, right? So there's a lot of risk around that, but preparing it for a bigger scale, right? I think that's very important. That you cannot just being small too many years. It's just too expensive. I mean, I would say that so, and that requires multi-year planning in a sense between the farmers, the processors, and then the final customers, and a lot of commitment in that. So that I would say.
My experience is it's a lot different.
Yeah.
In the US, consumer traits are first adopted by the company because nobody wants the risk.
Yeah.
Right? So when we had low linoleic oil, it had to be sold first. So who bought it? Kellogg's bought it, other people bought it. So we had a contract with them to figure out the volume. And because the market's so big, Monsanto then grew the crop in the US, then shipped everything to Argentina, grew the crop again, and then was ready to plant in the US. So it's very quick depending on who you're working with. But once again, what happened there is we had to pay a grower premium to the farmers to guarantee that seed. And we had to get tanks, right? So in the US, your planting season is much narrower. So in about 18 months, everything came to scale, regardless of what the cost. It just comes to scale. But my experience has been it comes to scale to solve a problem and it'll get costs reduced. You know, it's like the high Olathe canola oil. It was all done right from the beginning. But once again, the solution was too expensive for the end consumer. And the market costs reduced it very quickly and figured out how not to use high oleic canola and go with regular canola. And the biggest difference between here and Europe is that consumers in the US didn't know. I don't think I've been in any trait anywhere. The only time we've been looking at consumers, the companies I've worked for, which are two now, don't want to engage the consumer because they feel that they're threatening their current customer base, right? So they don't want to go out and say, you know, we have a really good antimicrobial, but they don't want to say Tyson's antimicrobial sucks and ours is better because we're already selling it to Tyson. So that's a problem. The industry has not paid for consumer awareness to teach them if it's good or bad or how much you have to eat, right? That's the problem. The American consumer is just not aware what they should be eating or why.
And that's a really good point that we're certainly confused in America. I think that's a summary of part of that. And just building on what the two of you said, that, you know, I worked with Jürgen on the high oleic sunflower oil, and I do remember it was a multi-year project. It began before I joined the business and went for several years afterwards. And there were big celebrations at the end of the year about the profit that it brought in. There was another similar trend on another healthier oil or an alternative to trans fatty acid products that we did not start several years in advance. And there was like continuous discussion about, oh my gosh, we could do something in, you know, cocoa butter substitutes and in equivalents and replacing trans fatty acid. And every year we'd have the exact same conversation. We did nothing about it while the competition just ate our lunch because we hadn't prepared for it. And I think that that's one of the key messages, that there were a lot of opportunities, but it went down to real business opportunities and preparation and doing the real due diligence and seeing how it really fits into the real business model. Just to close out, are there other key things? What are the most important things that you'd highlight for this group coming out of this conversation that you want to make sure that we really capture? And I'll begin with Dr. Palacios.
Well, I guess it's important to understand the target. Where are you, or for whom are you developing the product, and involve all the stakeholders from the beginning. Yeah, and get the people buy-in into the product. Nutritional education, in the case of interventions for Global South, I think they are important. It's important to create the awareness and how this type of products can help. Will not solve the problem, but they can help. So that is also important, but it's very important to involve all the stakeholders from the beginning. So to whom you are developing these products, and I think just be innovative also in the way how you can use the products that are available. Is also very important, and take advantage in the case of starting a new breeding program, for instance. Just take advantage of the genetic diversity that is available and see if you can do better things from there. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Palacios. Jürgen?
Yeah, next to the collaboration, right, aspect, I would also say, we talked about consumers and stuff like that, but be a bit creative how a solution could look like, right? I try to point out a little bit at different ways to roam, right, in terms of solving a problem. That might be industry collaboration, changing specs, whatever it is. There might be a different smart way maybe to do this, which is not that costly, right, to open the eyes. This is not a straightforward thing. But I'm also engaging with the foundation because I think this business case is so huge, right? So it requires a lot of thought how to get to kind of that change. It might be different than we think it is today. So still be creative and innovative in things how we can think through this, right? And engage with different people you normally wouldn't engage in whatever medical and whatever, right? Maybe you find a way to get attraction.
Thank you, Jürgen.
So for me is you need to educate the consumer. We're not a pharmaceutical company. A pharmaceutical company will take the higher costs because they take a 25-year patent and nobody can copy them for 25 years. So I have sold microcrystalline cellulose, polyols, all these to the pharmaceutical companies because they have a need and they get a patent for 25 years. I think in the food industry, we're not that lucky. So we have to have a pull-through strategy. An educated consumer will drive change. The industry in the US, they won't change unless they're forced to. And the government in the US doesn't perceive the health crisis that it's in. So it's not going to legislate it. It won't legislate anything in the US. So unless you have an educated consumer, your traits could be as wonderful as they want and nobody knows about it and nobody will buy it. So I just came off a study right now for nutrition. And I looked at, I mean, I've been in the industry 34 years. I looked at what I ate because I had to charge every single thing. If you guys are familiar with Chicago hot dogs, they put everything on it. Well, this damn study wanted me to include everything. And was it a teaspoon or less than a teaspoon? I'm like, I don't know. So anyway, I looked at it and I saw, I don't really know what I consumed. I saw one day I had hot dogs for lunch and hot dogs for dinner. And I was pretty shocked. I was embarrassed. But, you know, this is the US. I eat in my car. If somebody doesn't tell me, I won't know it's healthier. And that was the conclusion of this study for me. After 2 weeks of tracking everything, I realized I didn't eat enough vegetables. I don't know what type of breads I ate.
Thank you, Fernando. That makes it very real about the challenge and the opportunity that we have to make people healthier. Thank you very much, all of you, for taking the time to educate us and to share your experiences with consumer-oriented traits. Thank you. We will have a break, but I do ask for just a minute, maybe with, if Catherine, if you can come up and like to recognize. This is the second year that we've had the Heroes Award associated with the Coalition for Grain Fiber for the effort to bring out the healthfulness of dietary fiber in wheat. And this year we have 3 winners that we wanted to represent and recognize. Dr. Kim Garland Campbell of the USDA ARS for her work in ensuring that we get all the science that we saw the results of, and it was really exciting, and she really was critical in making sure that that happened. The second one is Dr. Alicia Kisonis of the Western Wheat Quality Lab for a lot of the research that you guys saw the results of in terms of the US and what is the level of dietary fiber in the United States. And the third one is Dr. Sean Finney for his work, because he's ran that lab and really pulled together all 3 of them with the work and really integrated this into a message for the industry that we can share with consumers, that we can share with everyone about what this is, what is happening, and why is there incredible value opportunity here for everyone.
And I just want to, say it's been great working with all 3 of these scientists, and I wish we could do more than offer this award, especially in the light of the changes that have happened in Pullman. But just want to say again that we are so grateful for the contribution of the ARS scientists in Pullman, and that at CGF would not be where we are without them. And so we look forward to working with them in whatever form it may take next.